another episode of the Community Development Podcast, doing what it says on the tin, connecting the community development workforce, sharing its learning and promoting the value of the approach. My name is Russell Todd and I have the very great pleasure of Gary Brown. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks, Russell.
We are in little village, or is it a town?
Oh, village.
It's a village, it is still a village, of Brymbo, and it's to the northwest of Wrexham. We're in northeast Wales. I'm on the site of a steelworks that shut in sort of 1990, and before that, for best part, probably 200 years or so, had been a site of steel making, but prior to that, iron.
That's right.
And then, and so it's sort of industrially then important, and in terms of heritage, we're going to talk a lot about heritage, but actually is architecturally important. So in 1958, what is known locally and perhaps even internationally as Brymbo Man was discovered, flint tools with him, earthenware dating back to the Bronze Age. And then just over 10 years ago, and I think about 2005, a fossilised forest was discovered as some of the other sort of landscape and reclamation work was being done on the site, and that's dating back to kind of almost 300 million years, which I'm struggling to get my head around because Wales, British Isles is sort of on the equator and tropical, and if you know Wales, it's not tropical, and so you've got this quite, almost unfathomably sort of long, complex timeline, yet you've been working with local people here because there was a steelworks that they wanted to kind of retain the memory of and to sort of to celebrate. And you've got this massive history before, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. Yeah. So that gives an idea, listeners, to kind of where we are and the sort of the geography then, I suppose. It's steelworks goes. It's not a traditional maybe sort of steelworks town. We're up in the hills, aren't we? We're not on the coast, which some of the ones in South Wales that I'm familiar with, of course, in Llanwern, Llanelli, Port Talbot in particular. Shotton again, though, right? On the River Dee, of course, in North Wales. So, a bit of an incongruous location for a huge sort of steelworks. And maybe explore some of that in the next sort of 3/4 of an hour. But you're the project manager with Brymbo Heritage. What else do people need to know about you? What is your background then in community development? Because you haven't been doing this for a huge amount of time.
No. It's funny, I find myself in a heritage project, but I'm not a historian, nor am I a great industrialist. I consider myself a community development practitioner, and that's a field of work I've been involved in now for 20 years or so. Some through the Training and Enterprise Council movement and community learning, and then all through the 2000s doing work with Wrexham County Borough Council as community development manager, looking at Communities First, European funded programmes, localised initiatives for community regeneration that we had, all the while focusing on the role that people in communities had in shaping responses to the issues that they faced and to the facilities that they have. I came into the role here in Brymbo Heritage Group knowing it was about heritage and it was about the richness of that 300 million year story and where we go from here, very much about regeneration and a vision for the buildings and celebrating that history. But I came into it with an attitude set that betrayed my history in community development, that this wasn't just a case of doing a nice set of drawings and plans to prettify buildings and make them accessible. This was about really reconnecting community with these spaces that the community had been formed around in the first place. So it's very much around community is at the heart. You've recently had, and when we first trying to line this up, this hadn't been announced, and it was great to kind of see it, and I suppose it's timely in that regard. You've recently just had almost £2 million of lottery money. Those sorts of awards, what little I know about these sorts of awards and certainly that volume, they can't just be given to people in an ivory tower. They have to have demonstrable community involvement, community input, influence to shape design and the outcomes and things like that. So that's a fairly sizable award. Yeah, absolutely. It's only 2 weeks ago that we heard, so we're still slightly in shock. As starting to turn now into panic in terms of how to deliver it in the best possible way. But no, the pathway to getting us to a point where we were being seriously considered for that sort of investment by the big lottery is a long one that starts with the group's roots 20 years ago. A few years after the steelworks closed, some of the ex-workers, knowing that some of the historical buildings weren't going to be flat and subject to being built over with new houses and so on. Its roots are anchored in that sort of coming together to look after something and preserve it for future generations. And the series of things that have happened in the last 20 years then to to understand the vision for bringing the place back to life as a mixture of a heritage attraction, a learning centre, some space for businesses, community events. That's really got its own head of steam, as it were, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, and doing extensive work since 2014 on engaging additional people in the project. And that's just by opening the doors and saying, what do you do with this place? That isn't about consulting with people in the sense of, look, we think we're going to do this, what do you think? Do you endorse what we're going to do, or do you not endorse what we're going to do? That's not community development, that's not involvement. This has been a more genuine opening of the doors and say, come and join us, get under the skin of this place, and we've got ideas, but what are your ideas? And together we're going to come up with a package of ideas that actually could give us that critical mass to make this work. We're all in it together. And so that spirit has been building. Now, the 2 million that you talk about is big lottery funding. It's from a programme called Create Your Space. There are, I think, 6 projects in Wales that are being supported over the next 7 years. In a project framework, if you like, from the big lottery, with some money from Welsh Government as well, to really pathfind approaches to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the whole concept of sustainability. Really groundbreaking stuff from Wales that other countries are yet to tap into and learn from. They're looking to take risks. They're looking to support organisations that have got a learning kind of attitude, and that's very much where we think we might have stood a chance getting this fund. So we're really pleased that we have done. In our case, the 2 million over 7 years is going to support 10, 12 area projects where we're reconnecting residents with spaces that were left behind when the industry went. So these are coal slag tips, bits of former railway line, bits of the banks of the steelworks that are partially accessible, and some people are using them, but they're not fully accessible. And certainly most people that are using them, unless they have lived in the area for 30, 40 years, are oblivious perhaps to the history of that and how that landscape came to be. And in many cases that landscape is completely man-made. It's less than 100 years old, and you wouldn't know it because it's blended in so well with everything else. So this approach that we're taking is around connecting people with those spaces by saying, right, we've got this money, we've got these spaces, what are we going to do with them? And again, that isn't about consulting to say, we think we can do this, do you endorse it? This is, look, we've got a shared opportunity here. And it's very nice to be involved in a community development piece of work that is about looking at shared opportunities and how we work together to realise them, instead of shared problems and how we tackle them. And it shows, to my mind, just how applicable community development approaches and principles are, whether it's a problem you're trying to solve or it's an opportunity you're trying to realise.
I suppose there's an interesting juxtaposition insofar as the plans that you've got. You've got this fossilised forest that perhaps people didn't necessarily know was there. Very natural, before there were humans and things like that, before there were dinosaurs, and next to what is a man-made landscape. And that's an interesting juxtaposition, and certainly just the little tour I had before we started, really you don't realise quite how cheek by jowl they are. And I did some internet research to try to sort out the timeline in my mind, and it's on the site, but it's a big site, the old steelworks site, isn't it, clearly? But they're literally next door. It is a stone's throw away, isn't it? And I think as well what came through as well as we were chatting, as you were explaining a little bit more about the vision, the proposals, challenges, because it's not all been plain sailing by any means, is that you've got this man-made, very extractive, economically, many would argue socially, period in time. It's all about maximising profit, getting the value out of that land. Okay, there's local employment for people, but these places explode in terms of population, certainly traditionally in the primary industry, the coal fields, in the industrialised age, and then these places are dropped. And as soon as their use has been fulfilled, but essentially these places are then dropped. I think you were saying to me that the plant that was built only about 10 years before the steelworks closed was then shipped over to China. But it seems to me that the long-term vision for these places wasn't considered anywhere near the level of detail and care and attention it probably should have been. People have different views on that. It's extractive, arguably exploitative, driven by short-term opportunity and profit, and whereas we're talking about, and you've mentioned to me, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're already...
It's generational stuff.
Yeah. And we're already kind of over 20 years since the steelworks shut. And those initial local people, those initial workers, collectivised, mobilised and said, listen, we want to do something. And they may not have had a particularly huge idea as to what that might be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's been any number of visions over the years. And it just feels a little bit more ethical to my mind that actually, okay, we're not just going to come in as project managers, as the local authority, as partners, stakeholders, professional architects, surveyors, etc., and tell you, because that's, I think, just as extractive.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no such thing as a short-term fix to a long-term problem. I became involved in the project only really meaningfully about 5 years ago. I've been aware of it. I live in the area and have done for 12 years now. But I'd always got a sense that the psyche of the community was still feeling the hurt 25 years after the closure of the works, that nothing had been put in place. And when I mean nothing had been put in place, physically some things have been put in place. Physical reclamation, half of it built out with 500 or 600 houses now, a new road, plans for a school are finally coming together, supermarket and shops will follow as well. There's lots of physical things that have been in the pipeline and they're taking a very long time to come to fruition. But that doesn't really replace what has been lost. And it's very emotive, but it feels to me like the thing that was lost was pride and identity. And you can't get back pride and identity by more houses, a new road and shops and supermarket. A school goes a long way towards that, though. Yeah. That's a different kind of generational change that the school has a great potential to achieve. So part of the mission that the Heritage Group has been on, although it's the proportion of the former steelworks site that the Heritage Group is custodian of an eventual landowner is less than a quarter of the landscape, much less than a quarter, I'm sure. So we shouldn't have the lion's share of influence, but the influence we're trying to bring is to look in that very long-term way about what it would be that will put Brymbo back on the map, as it were, that would enable residents and those that are taking part in the project to really be sticking their chests out and going, I made this happen.
Yeah.
Despite whoever did whatever happened in 1990, whatever the sequence of events was that led to that decision to close a profitable, sustainable site, with many years of production left and all those things, whatever led to that, the thing it took away was that pride. And if the bits that we can put together as a whole tapestry of activities, uses, and most importantly people, and therefore stake, and therefore ownership, back into the place, we stand a good chance of getting widespread regeneration of pride. And if you can put pride back in, then the pride can transfer from people of our generation to the children. That's where I think the primary school does play a major role in the journey that we're on.
And you have links with curriculum and education programs.
A big part of what we're doing here is schools program. There's a strong link between the personalities that are involved here and the school in terms of governing body and teaching staff and stuff like that. So,
quick plug for sort of online, social media,
absolutely,
channels.
Well, if I could talk about social media for a moment, because I've really come to appreciate through this 3 years in this project just how powerful social media is in a very localised community. I mean, the people that we're trying to involve in this project are all within walkable distance, 1-2 mile radius, that sort of distance. In a traditional community development setting, it's doable to go around pounding the streets, knocking doors, leafleting, doing newsletters, and those are techniques and things that we need to do, and I would say we actually don't do enough of, and that's because social media doesn't entirely replace those older techniques. They are effective.
I agree.
But where social media has really helped, and Facebook particularly, given some of the key people we're trying to involve in the project are working households of parents in their 20s through to 40s, perhaps with children, and certainly teenagers we're trying to involve in this. Making as much of what we are doing available and accessible from the armchair. So it's a slow feed, if you like, of what we're about, what we're doing, what our attitude is, what our personality is. And social media really allows you to do that in a way a website doesn't, in a way print media doesn't. You can be responsive, you can take flack, you can encourage flack, engage in the conversation. Not everything that we're trying to do is popular, and not everything we're trying to do will come off. But Facebook particularly gives a great platform for the immediacy and the transparency of what we're doing. And several people that are involved now in the project cite the fact that we were able to give an honest response directly in those sort of fields, if you like, to why they've become involved, because it spoke of an integrity, a spirit. That, for community development work to work, the people involved in it have got to really believe that collective action and self-determination are actually the way it works. They're not tokenist things. They're not things to be doled out as prizes or as crumbs on the table. And that presents challenges. So I will come back to plugging the website and stuff in a moment, but you mentioned challenges very early on. We talked about some of these, but the challenges come in a project like ours, where we have spent a lot of time and lots more people are involved now. The whole thing is snowballing, has snowballed, because those people are bringing great ideas and additional content.
All right.
Yeah. So I'll start a bit again. A project like ours is going through challenges, though, because we've got huge snowballing of influence, of stake, and yet we've also got dimensions to the project that have to be very heavily technically supervised. For example, some of the stabilisation works on the heritage buildings we've got, some of the accessibility issues that we've got, some of the safety concerns that we have. Those things have to be done by technically competent people, certified people. And so we get this abrasion slightly between the extent to which the people that make this project are engaged in it and owning it, and the tasks that sometimes we need to bring in other people that will just be very transactional, their involvement, and they will disappear again. But the project could have been delivered in a way that was all about those professionals and all about those transactions and all just about the physical buildings. And arguably, we could have done that project 10 years ago in better funded climates and achieved a restoration of the buildings a lot earlier. But the key question is, would we have had the sense of connection with those buildings, that landscape and our history, that would create the sort of future we're trying to create now that we think we're on the verge of? And the answer would certainly be no.
Yeah.
Coming back to the website and so on, if you want to find out more, the general content about what we're about is at www.brymboheritage.co.uk. Brymbo, for those of you not familiar with it, spelled Brymbo, but pronounced like Brum as in Birmingham. So brymboheritage.co.uk. Find out loads there. Look for us on Facebook and on Twitter, both through Brymbo Heritage Project. I'm quite active on both. They're very useful tools. Incidentally, Twitter for us we find less useful as a community engagement tool and much more useful as a partner engagement tool. And we've been very successful in this project at engaging at a UK and a Wales and a Wrexham County Borough level in terms of political awareness and political support. And that is undoubtedly contributing to the sort of things we're able to achieve now. That whole sense of partnership working is multi-layered and multi-dimensional. We don't find Twitter works as well for us as the local community, whereas Facebook does that brilliantly. So not relying on just one tool as well if you're into social media is a very important thing.
And I think that general distinction then, that Facebook for community, Twitter for more stakeholder partner, political engagement, I think that general sort of distinction between the two I think isn't unique to yourselves, and I certainly know through the Community First programme that's been very much the case as well. And I suppose the key with all of these things is try not to find the one size that fits all or that one single kind of magic bullet, but actually, okay, what work is going to work for us best to achieve what we want to achieve. Yeah. And I think, you talk about young people, and increasingly I'm finding myself with some of the digital inclusion training that I also do is around this Snapchat thing that all the youngsters are doing. Right, I'm going to have to find out what that's all about.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, for example, Instagram, I would imagine there's a massive demand for that very sort of visual medium on site, because there are some fascinating things, both standing from afar, looking at the site, and as I was coming in on the windy kind of road up through the villages on the other side of the valley, there's a couple of stunning kind of shots of the whole site from across the way. But then there's also some great industrial, there's decay, there's rust, there's broken bits of slate and glass, and you've got to watch your step. But some of that is very photographic and very photogenic as well, if that's your thing. And that would just lend itself to a very visual social media platforms such as Instagram and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's trying to find, I think, with all of these things, what are we looking to achieve and what's the best platform and medium to help us achieve that, and then look to to see how they then can complement, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's advice I give.
We don't have an Instagram presence ourselves, but a lot of the people that work as part of the project do. And they're constantly feeding out stuff of them doing stuff in this environment, and that's great because we're just getting the association of this environment with positive stuff. It's just worth its weight in gold. We've had 3 pop videos filmed here in the last 2 years. Different genres of music, blues or Pink Floyd stuff, Mumford & Sons kind of folk rock stuff, and a younger pop band, all with their own following, all with a couple of thousand hits on the YouTube videos of these videos. And again, you're just associating a place with a different purpose, a different use.
Yeah. So broader generation has been taking place not just in Brymbo but in the surrounding area for a long time. You talked about some of the European programmes that you were involved in with your former local authority and council hat on. And West Wrexham would be something that a lot of people locally would identify with, or at the very least recognise as a term to encapsulate some of that, if I'm right, yeah? But we're talking about heritage. We're drilling down a little bit. So heritage is part of that agenda. And in my experience working in the South Wales Valleys, for instance, a little bit in Cardiff Docks at the moment, some of the stuff around the coal exchange in Cardiff, is that heritage thing is very, very emotive. It's very, very emotional in some cases, but it really does allow people to connect to maybe a broader agenda around regeneration. So have you found you're finding that's very much 100%. The case?
100%. Yeah, I mean, heritage is the reason why a place has come to exist. It's in the bricks and mortar, but often it's in the personality of the place, and certainly the identity of the place, how one place relates to another within this county borough. They've all got their relative sort of places and merits. So heritage is absolutely it's the glue that sort of gives us a common bond, if you like. Another aspect of heritage being central to regeneration is that it's regeneration is about what is to be, isn't it? It's the future. How you can redefine that future, and heritage allows us to see that as a kind of continuity, really. In the 200-year industrial heritage of Brymbo, it's not a constant period. It wasn't active non-stop for 200 years. There were 3 periods of break. The longest of those was over 20 years. And at each of those break points, somebody is needed to work out what the future was, let alone the times where 1885, the conversion to steel, absolutely milestone sort of moment in the history of the place. But somebody's working with a whole range of stakeholders to work out where we go from here. And that's where we are now. And actually, the more of that spirit that we can learn from the past, that the entrepreneurship, if you like, that was shown by these guys, and build that into our thinking, the risk-taking. What, we don't know what the future holds in this uncertain world that we live in these days. It's no less certain than it was 200 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 50 years ago. And so feeling, and again, this is the emotive stuff in it, the sense of energy and positivity to us is coming a little bit because we're framing our journey looking forward as just another chapter in the book. And look how well it turned out for all those others that did it before. You know what? It didn't go wrong very much. Of course, it did in 1990. But actually, you look back and it went right a lot more than it went wrong. So let's carry on that tradition and let's go into it with our glass half full and we'll crack on. And that's working.
So you mentioned that in terms of community, some of the involvement is people who used to work here, like steelworkers, people who have a direct connection with the site. We talk in community development about wanting to empower, wanting to transfer power or to facilitate the transfer of power from people who have it, institutions who have it, to others that perhaps don't, or who could wield it better, more effectively. To what extent is that part of what you're trying to achieve here? Because it's over a very, very long term, isn't it? And to be fair, I would imagine there's a lot of stakeholders that are all and partners wanting to achieve the same thing. So that positivity and that buying into the vision, we sometimes sort of say, it's probably not too hard to find and to mobilise. Is there any power? Are there any inequalities here or not?
I think it's a real motivator to us to use this as a vehicle where we can make sure that power is as shared as it can be. The involvement base, first of all. The roots of the group were ex-workers. But we're not rooted, as it were, in terms of membership numbers and volunteer numbers who are ex-workers. Less than 10% probably of our combined membership and volunteer base, just over 100, probably less than 10 of them are ex-workers. probably another 10 to 15 are people that have got a direct connection with the steelworks through family members, through the longevity of their residence. But that leaves 3/4 of the people that are involved with us that have actually got no direct personal connection with the works. What they've got a connection with is the sense of the potential, the physical environment we've got between the fossil forest, the landscape, the ironworks, the bits of steelworks, buildings that are here, to act as a platform for something different, something better, and actually a range of things. And that power comes from, you mentioned buying into a vision. Well, actually, the degree to which there's a vision here is that the vision is just about putting us back on the map and creating pride. Full stop.
Yeah.
How we do that is the basis of our engagement with people.
Okay.
And because they hold answers, that they're personally committed to then having a go at delivering, the power isn't centralised in a committee or in a manager. The power to achieve the totality of that vision is shared absolutely amongst the 100 people that are each contributing a piece of the jigsaw. And so it's an odd, well, perhaps it's not odd. To me it's odd because it's different to the way that I've worked in community development thus far, in that I've wanted to empower as a key principle. I've wanted to encourage others to empower by undertaking genuine involvement rather than just sheer consultation. I've really striven for that as a professional and a personal mission. I see myself here not needing to push that any further because I'm working with a group of founding members and the management committee who have got this open attitude. That makes it very easy to not think about empowering as something that I give to somebody in a parent-child way, which kind of implies that at some point I might want it back and I could disempower them. That doesn't seem to be part of our setup and our experience. It's much more a genuine shared thing because there's an almighty set of problems to overcome here and an equally almighty set of opportunities that we could realise. And only actually by us working together can we attempt to tackle half the problems and hope to realise half the opportunities. We can't do that as a small group of people. So you don't get empowerment as something that is somehow tokenistic. You get empowerment because we're all in it together. And as a result, when we've done something, the joy is celebrated by everybody that's been part of that. It's not attributable to one person who has chosen to share out the power in some kind of a philanthropic way. It feels more guttural than that.
You used words a moment ago like striven and push, and sometimes we kind of almost Newton's laws of physics. In order to push, you need to have a force coming in the opposite direction, whether that's economic forces or it's political decisions or it's these huge kind of institutions of whatever sector. And I think what's quite refreshing talking to you and having a kind of a wander around is that things haven't been conceived in that potentially adversarial way. I
think that's largely true. There is a little bit of the adversarial stuff because what we're kicking back against, in your Newton's metaphor there, is that there's a sense that a lot of stuff hasn't happened that could have happened earlier in the process. That there were some failed promises early on. One of the first things was looked at when the steelworks closed was whether you could just bring a different style of manufacturing to this huge site, nearly a mile long, quarter mile wide. I think Hoover was quoted at one point as potentially moving lock, stock and barrel. Never happened. So you've got like a double blow then. Because for a year people have got some excitement and actually there might be a conversation here, there might be something we can move into. So there's a little bit of us pushing against that. There's a little bit of us pushing against, I don't know if you've used the phrase, but I've certainly had conversations with other CD practitioners a lot along the way, that you've got apathy. Apathy is one of the biggest barriers to taking positive action. But when you've got aggressive apathy, which seems like an oxymoron, you can't have something that's proactively apathetic. Yet you can, And so one of the things that I have felt that we've been pushing against is that sense that apathy is acceptable. That actually, if you've got a gripe about it, well, come and join in. Don't moan about it. Don't sit on the fence saying it should be done this way, it should be done that way. If you want it done differently, the door's open. There's the spade. And it's not an overt part of our approach, but it's definitely happened, where we've got a couple of members I could point to who were only involved because somebody has called them out on their criticism of what's happening. And they've gone, well, all right, come and give us a hand then. And that fuels its own sense then that people like that are going back with a very changed perception about what it's about. And in the case of one of those people, they're very much an influencer in their immediate circle and their immediate neighbourhood, which has a ripple effect. Yeah, in terms of a wider kind of power dynamic, we don't really feel like we're pushing against anything. We've got great support, as mentioned earlier, at the different kind of political levels. We come unstuck a little, every now and then with the local community council, who want to see that what we're doing is for the best long-term benefit, but we might have niggles about particularly the way we're doing it, or slight misunderstandings as well. I mean, some of the things that you and I will know and listeners will know about the way that CD works is that it does open up ways of cutting through some of the traditional sequential processes. So things like, our Create Your Space bid, for example, the Community Council couldn't get conceptually at the stage we were making the bid, in the sense that how could we be bidding for £2 million to implement a range of projects if those projects haven't already been fully detailed and gone through the planning process and got architect's drawings and tendered costs? Because that's a linear way of understanding how some physical regeneration work works. And that's completely understandable. But we're taking advantage of a lottery fund that's willing to look through a different prism of planning for landscape and accessible landscapes, which doesn't mean you have to have it all lined up perfectly before you then say to the community, right, the doors are open, come on in and use it. So there's a little bit of that that's in some way been a barrier, on other way has served to motivate us further to make sure that what we do then is we can prove that the approach we're taking is right. So there's a little bit of kicking back there.
I'm minded to assume perhaps, and as I said, I don't know, but that particular lottery fund has probably adapted in that way because things so very rarely are that linear.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And so it's adapting to a bit more of a real world scenario where we're clearer on some things, less clear on others.
Certainly that pragmatism about how things develop is a key part of the way that fund seems to be working. But it is a bit more overt in their case than that. I think they are trying to facilitate the sense of ownership of landscapes and their use for future generations. And they well understand that the way of ensuring that ownership is there is involvement from day one in what the conceptual use of that land is going to be. And people, as our people in the Ironworks Fossil Forest bit of the project, we've opened the doors, people have come in with ideas, and now they're also sharing the pain of, well, actually, there's barriers in the way of realising those ideas for regulations or premises licences or health and safety. And, if the idea is good, then you persevere and tenacity wins through. But some ideas have to get put on the back burner or even abandoned because they're just not feasible in a safe way. So it is with these landscapes. We want people to join us in coming up with the ideas, but we also want to involve them. Not just by saying, okay, give us your ideas, we'll then go away and develop those into plans. We'll come back to you when we're ready to implement it. Is that all right? Again, that's a traditional way of working.
Yeah.
No. These people that are involved in the ideas, well, if you want to be part of the project, you have a good idea, but also we want you to help develop that idea. We want you to be part of the working group and steering group that's going to meet with the planning officer about actually what the constraints are and whether we can reverse that tree protection order and open up a view that otherwise we can't do. That pain of the journey is as important as the joy of the journey, to really embed the sense that at the end of the day, this is something that we all achieve together. And that's where we've found in this big lottery fund a partner that is coming at this from the same approach that we are. And that's when you get a very strong relationship. And I hope it proves to go that way, that we're in it for the same reasons. Which is, again, different from a lot of other projects where you find yourself looking at all the dimensions to a project and you find the bit of a project that seems to chime with a particular funder's objectives. And before you know it, you're contorting the integrity of your vision for the project to fit with the funder. So it's really nice to be working with this particular project that is a direct fit.
And that enthusiasm comes through as well. So even the short time I've been on site this afternoon, 4 or 5 people have kind of poked their heads in, want an update on something, chasing a set of keys. I mean, you couldn't have scripted it or timetabled it better. Somebody dropped off the letter. Is it the acceptance letter for that £2 million quid? That's serendipitous on my part in terms of trying to sort of come on site and record this and sort of scratch beneath the skin a little bit of it. And that's nice, and you can sense that positivity. But like you said, it's still at the very outset of it. It's still at base camp, I suppose, in terms of spending this money and achieving what you want to achieve. And there will be those points of conflict, as you say, and that's what comes through partnership work. And we that inevitably these days that has to be again hardwired into things like applications. But I think it's interesting to kind of make that point that I said this on the podcast recorded with Alan 12 Trees, and we say this from a CD point of view, is that the process and the means is as important, if not more so, than the goal.
Absolutely.
And you've touched on that in pretty much everything you've said for the last 5-10 minutes.
In a sense, that's why, again, I like that particular lottery fund. It's the recognition that the goal in this case is ownership. Is that spiritual connection. Whereas often the goal is a physical output, or it's a number of bums on seats, or it's a tangible
and the traditional sort of form of sort of political patronage for these things is that you need a VIP to cut the ribbon and to open the envelope and to receive the big check, and actually unveiling ownership actually is
much more subtle than that.
Almost impossible to actually do, because there is no definitive point at which suddenly ownership has happened.
And I think we can have another conversation, and maybe we'll do one at some point around just social impact measures, and actually how you really put a value or a metric on some of this intangible stuff, this stuff that when you talk to people, it's oozing out of them, and it's oozing out in passion and enthusiasm as much as it's oozing out in upset and anger and frustration, because the sense of ownership and caring about something is so deeply ingrained. Either emotional response is a great indicator of that outcome. I agree.
It's the great, you're a musician as well, it's the great sort of Neil Young quote, isn't it, that I find myself in the middle of the road and it's boring, so it's better to head for the ditch, on the side of the road, whichever way you want to go. And I think from a community development point of view, actually consensus and pats on the back are great, they're easy to take. Sometimes you need to seek out and confront those people that are kind of, you say, have got those brickbats, have got the criticisms, and say, okay, well, what else would you do? How differently would you do it? Because yes, you get those converts, but actually then it's challenging you to look at maybe different perspectives.
Yeah, definitely.
As well.
No, it remains every bit as important to us to try and continue to engage those that are sceptical, cynical about whether anything will really come of it, as it is to talk with those who are the willing enthusiasm, who have just been waiting for an opportunity like this to come along, and that there are lots of those, and it's really uplifting, life affirming. The amount of people that actually have come to us in the last few months, they know we've submitted the bid, but they don't know whether we've got the money or not, and saying, look, actually, that idea you've generated, we'd really like to get involved in that. Whether the money comes or not, how can we do so? All that stuff's great, but really for the partnership to work, for the relationships to work, you've got to not be scared of the tough stuff, the difficult conversations.
You're clearly up for those challenges. Some of the people, if not all of the people involved, are as well. Many congratulations on the lottery bid. It's not the only iron in the fire, though, is it?
No. In fact,
successes elsewhere with other funds.
I mean, it's ironic, really, because that 2 million has come. In fact, the news of that 2 million came 2 days after the news that we hadn't been successful with the project that we've been working on, which is the main ironworks of Foss Forest one, of its first time of asking for a different bit of lottery funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund. But we were very close with that, so we're resubmitting, and hopefully we'll get some good news in the autumn on that. But know that this 2 million is 2 out of a total of £9.5 million that we're seeking over this 5 to 7 year period to make a step change in the way that our heritage is understood, and it's used as a catalyst for regeneration.
In terms of like the immediate plans, what happens then when sum of money like that is awarded? You sort of said you spent the first week, celebrating, patting yourselves on the back. Then it was that, oh my god. And now it's that, okay, we're looking up from base camp.
Yeah. It's literally stuff like, okay, within that 2 million, there's a staff team of 5 posts. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is work out our recruitment. Refine the job descriptions from what were in the bid. Is that really what we want them to do? To what extent can we test and adjust as we go along? All those sort of things. So, like the base camp, we're looking now at what the first 100 metres is of the climb, and to make sure that first 100 metres gives us the key bits of infrastructure. An office, for example, to accommodate 5 people. You've seen this building. Where would you put 5 people? Short of losing, we could lose this room, couldn't we?
Very good
This
question.
room is our meeting room that we're in. It seats about 15 people. It's in use daily because of the work teams that we've got doing stuff. We can't sacrifice a room like this to turn it into a nice office for a few people. So we're, another of those first 100 metre tasks is making sure we've got somewhere we can work out of. At the same time, we're doing stuff like making sure that the general public knows the good news, but also what the sort of short-term planning, what's going to happen in this first year. And our plan that we submitted was about using the first year to really build the further engagement, do a couple of emergency works with some of the bits of landscape we need to do, but really use that to act as a platform for the other 6. There's certainly there's no opportunity to get bored.
And you mentioned emergency work, and so I'm now a little bit worried now on the way out where I place my feet. Another plug for the contact details. Presumably people wanted to know more.
Yeah, please.
Welcome to get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a general email address which is info@brymboheritage.co.uk. Feel free to email me. It's just Gary, 1R for Gary, Gary@brymboheritage.co.uk. I said earlier, look for Brymbo Heritage Project. Just Google it. Our Twitter stuff, Facebook and webpage comes up. We're all, I don't suppose yet there are many other rival Brymbo Heritage Project websites, so we don't need to do anything with search engine optimization just yet because we're right at the top anyway. It's quite funny actually. Well, some of the junk email you get, as your project does get more well known. One of the most common ones is about search engine optimization, so it makes me laugh. Or have you emailed me because you've looked on Google and therefore if you've not seen that those 10 entries at the first page are all those
There's probably a Brymbo in Ohio or something, isn't there? And apart from that, there's not a huge amount of competition.
No, there's not. No.
Gary, once again, thank you very much. Thank you for the hospital welcome. Thank you for the guided tour. It's fascinating to see it from a different perspective. I wouldn't have driven past. I mean, I wasn't the last time I was here. I don't think the new road was put in, but it was kind of looking down from above. Yeah. And so to see it from across the valley, to see it from within the site and looking at different perspectives, there's a massive amount of work still to be done, which is not in any way a criticism. It's this realisation that it's such a broad canvas that you're working on, but not necessarily in a large area. We're not talking sort of huge reclamations of... No,
it's not massive acres,
valley sites, no.
But it's complex, but it's full of opportunity.
Yeah. Encourage people to take a drive by. As I said, it is a fascinating area, particularly for somebody from South Wales, where there perhaps is a tendency to assume that coal mining and the sort of steelwork areas, the primary industrial areas, are more in the south. There's a rich coal mining, steelmaking tradition in North Wales, and I know people from around sort of Tulacra and Point of Ayr and Gresford have many times emphasised that to me, sort of into Shropshire as well, and places like sort of St Martin's and Ifton and places like that. So if nothing else, I think there's an opportunity to kind of just rebalance out maybe a little bit of the sort of the social and industrial labour history of Wales as well by raising the prominence of a site like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very much been taken to heart by Cadw and by Welsh Government. Right. We feel like we're on the map as far as Wales is concerned, at long last. Yeah.
Gary, once again, diolch yn fawr, thank you very much. And it would be fantastic to be able to sort of come back and maybe, for however long this podcast is up and running, to kind of sort of maybe sort of chronicle the journey as it goes along over the next sort of few years. But you have talked about 20 years and 25 years. I can't stress this enough. And podcasts will be consigned to the dim, distant past in the same way that BBC computers probably are by the time.
It'd be like an 8-track.
Yeah. So I don't know what will replace podcasts by then. I'll do my best to keep up, is all I can try and promise. Best of luck with it. Best of luck to everyone else involved. And until next time, thank you very much.
Cheers.